Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of Sergeant Maverick, the podcast, all things police work, politics, and life. I'm your host, Sergeant Maverick. We're going to be talking about, obviously, police work, but we're going to be getting into a lot more issues as time goes on. We're going to be doing not only the cop talk, family segments where we're going to have family members on and kids to talk about what it's like having a parent or a spouse as a police officer. And we're going to be also crossing over to firefighters, get some of my firefighter buddies on from the service and talk about their jobs and the differences and similarities between both of our professions, poke a little fun at each other. And we're also going to be covering some of the issues that affect us all, especially as those of us cops and firefighters get older and retire, like investing in taxes. So it'll be a variety of things that we're going to be doing. So not only that, I also like to introduce my book that you can see called The Real Greatest Show on Earth. This is a truthful and unfiltered look at policing in America. I was able to tell our story as cops everywhere. We're all the same. It has my stories throughout the book and those topics that a lot of people want to know about that they don't. And my guests will also be the contributors to the book that gave me their stories graciously to include in the book. So we're going to be getting into those things also. So like with all cops and firefighters, for all of us, it starts with the police academy. And I thought it fitting that my very first guest is someone that started the police academy with me. And this is Lieutenant Carlos Devarona from the Miami Beach Police Department, retired. And I thought it was important that you be my first guest, since it was February 8th, 1983 at 0700 when we first met each other.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been 43 years I've been carrying your ass, and here I am again.
You know, I kind of knew you were going to fire the first shot there, but, you know, in police work, in the station and in the squads and everything, it's always shots fired between us.
That's how we roll.
So, we started the academy February 8th, 1983. And coincidentally, when I planned to do this first episode, scheduling it today, do you remember what today is?
16. No, I actually...
The 17th.
No. So I know what day it is.
This is the day we graduated the academy 43 years ago.
Wow. I didn't know that. You're up on these things. I don't keep up on those things.
I have a memory for dates, okay, and I like history. But when I scheduled this with you and our engineer, BJ, my son, we just said June 17th because you were available, he was available, and we could kick it off that way. And then actually this morning I said, wow, it's June 17th.
That is, wow, heaven sent.
Now, you know who called me just before you got here?
No.
Mike Stevens.
Oh, wow, Trainee Stevens.
Trainee Stevens. He is in Miami Beach right now at a conference, and he called me up to say happy anniversary.
Trainee Stevens was the flag carrier?
No.
He was the guy from Boston.
He was the guy from Boston. He was one of the platoon leaders because he was in the Marine Corps. He was chosen as a platoon leader. We'll get into all the stuff and how that academy went. But I want to get into some of your background first.
All right.
We all come from different places, all walks of life, deciding to come into police work or the fire service or the military. All of which, by the way, police and fire and military are my heroes. And we're going to be talking some about them also in upcoming episodes. But let's start with your background. Where are you from?
I was born in Cuba and raised in New Jersey, urban area, but
the town?
Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Okay.
And the way we got along is we played a lot of sports. That way we stayed out of trouble. And that kept me out of trouble. And as I was growing up, I realized I wasn't really good at school. I was okay, but, I was a ball player first, and then school was secondary.
What position?
Shortstop and pitcher.
You know, you are, I think, just a little shorter than me, but go on.
And so I'll leave it at that. We went from there. As I grew up, I realized I wasn't going to be a ball player. And I turned to Plan B. Plan B, my dad was a cop in Cuba for 23 years.
Where?
In Havana. So I followed in his footsteps. And I always laughed because he would say, I was a cop for 23 years. And I said, nobody keeps a job for 23 years. And here we are, we outlasted them both. I did my 25, you did your
37.
106, whatever it was. And we both got through, and we're very fortunate to have gotten through those years pretty much unscathed, physically.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Our backgrounds are similar. Though I was born here in Miami Beach, I grew up in New York, but my parents emigrated from Argentina in 59. So, as luck would have it, you and I are both American citizens by virtue of our parents wanting to come to this country.
That's it.
And you wanted to play baseball, I wanted to play soccer. And I thought I had a shot, but I went to a small college that nobody ever heard of. And, the pros weren't going to look at me. And then there was Plan B, like you say. So you're from Elizabeth, New Jersey. I grew up in southern New York State. We both came down here. How did you end up in South Florida?
That is a miracle of miracles. I wanted to be a cop in New Jersey, where I grew up in Elizabeth. I took the police test. I failed. I passed the written. I just passed. I failed the psychological. They knew I was crazy because that's where I grew up. So then I decided to come down to Miami. I took 3 different police tests here.
What were they?
Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and Miami Beach.
Okay.
Fort Lauderdale, I went and I took the lie detector. Now, I passed all the written tests. Never had a problem with written. But I failed their lie detector. And I wasn't lying. They said I lied about strange things. One, drug use, and the other one was my name. I said, you have to be kidding me. He said, look, a young Hispanic growing up in South Florida, fine, or New Jersey and South Florida, you think I might have used drugs. I don't know why, but okay, you want to think that. But my name, you really think I lied about my name? Okay. So I failed their lie detector. I went from there. I went to the city of Miami's eye test. I failed their eye test. There was no way I was going to be a police officer. I was going to have to go slumming and be a firefighter or something. But
I'm sure you guys like to hear that.
instead, I went to take the eye test in Miami Beach, which was stricter than Miami's. I go in to see a Dr. Grossman, little old guy. He's a pediatrician by trade, but he's the city physician. Very political. I go in to take the eye test, and I'm wearing contact lenses. He says, son, are you wearing contacts? I said, yes. He says, take them out. Cover your left eye. A, B, C, D, E. He says, very good. Cover your right eye. Doc, I can't see it. It's just too blurry. He says, son, I'm going to go in the other room. Now cover your eye and read the chart. So as honest as I am, he's in the other room. I cover my eye and I say, Doc, I can't see it. He peeks around the corner. He says, son, you understand I'm in the other room? Now cover your damn eye and read the chart. I said, oh, A, B, C, D, E. He says, very good. Next. I have no idea what happened. God was watching. Somebody was watching over me, and I got the job. But it doesn't end there. Dr. Grossman died a couple of years later. I was on the beat 12 years later at 75th Street in Collins. Car accident. Car against a wall. Little old lady's there. I go, ma'am, car wasn't moving. Store wasn't moving. I'm going to have to issue you a citation. She says, okay. So let me see your license and registration. She says, Grossman. Grossman? Were you related to Leo Grossman? She says, you knew my Leo. I said, oh my goodness, what a small world. I said, ma'am, I don't care if I get in trouble for not going to court. I'll write you the ticket because I have to. My bosses want me to write the ticket. I'm not going to court, don't worry. If I get in trouble, doesn't matter. I just have to pay you back a little bit. She cried, I almost cried, right there on the street. We hugged, and we went on from there. And so I forget what the original question was, but that's why I became a cop, how I became a cop.
Okay. So Miami Beach accepted you.
Somehow they did.
And you moved down
Yeah.
on the acceptance.
Yes.
Where did you land when you got into the Miami area?
Miami, what's it called? Hialeah Lakes, Hialeah Gardens, Hialeah Gardens, right off 103rd Street. So I would drive right across 103rd all the way to the academy, and that's where I landed at first.
All right, so it was a little easier for you. I was coming from the West Kendall area, and it was a nightmare to get to the academy. So for the folks that may be outside of South Florida that don't know, the academy at that time is at Miami-Dade College North Campus, and it was called the Southeast Florida Institute of Criminal Justice, where every agency in Dade County, as it was called then, now it's Miami-Dade, sent all their cadets, and that's how you went to the academy. Later on, Miami started their own, and Miami-Dade, my department, started our own. But all the rest of the agencies still send them to Miami-Dade College. And it was no fun commuting from West Kendall. The Palmetto, always a nightmare, and then 103rd Street before the Gratney Expressway was built. You went across it, but not only we had to go from Kendall to the Palmetto to that, across, there were days coming home from Hialeah south on the Palmetto that were just a freaking nightmare. And it took sometimes an hour and a half, 2 hours to get home. I remember one night it took me 3 hours to get home. And because a crash, 6-car crash, pileup right next to me, it happened. Boom, 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 boom. And I go, I got out of that one, and I kept going. But I didn't care for it because of the commute. That was a problem for me. But anyway, so now you chose Miami Beach, and our academy class, basic law enforcement class, BLE 84.
We are tough to the core.
Tough to the core, exactly. We started, like we said, February 8th, 1983 at 0700 hours. And do you remember how it was right when the class started with our new training advisors, Corporal Otis Anderson and Officer Tony Soto?
Those guys scared me to death. They were just on point. They were loud, and they were in our face, and we did a lot of push-ups. But the first thing I noticed when I went in there is, we all had the same uniform in the academy. But they came in these brown uniforms. And
here we go.
I couldn't understand. Are these park rangers? What are these guys? Where I grew up in New Jersey, park rangers wore brown. And here I am having these park rangers address me. I didn't understand. So to this day, I still call Sergeant Maverick my bud, Bert. I call him Park Ranger, and Mrs. Park Ranger, his wife.
So much so that you gifted us 2 coffee mugs that say Park Ranger on them.
Still,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I get it, and I've always enjoyed the ribbing. Again, shots fired.
Hey, boo-boo.
But it was all fun, yeah. I remember that Anderson and Soto first went around the classroom and asked us all, so why do you want to become a cop? Stand up and tell us your story. And we all basically said, we want to help people, and we'll put bad guys in jail and all that kind of stuff. And after we were all done doing that is when as I wrote in the book, the torture, abuse, training started. And from then on, it was, for those first couple of days, push-ups and running till we couldn't do any more. And that really happened in the first day when you couldn't do any more push-ups.
Oh, yeah.
Like is typical in an academy class. I'm guessing the fire goes through the same thing. We know the military does with boot camp. But the first couple of days, I remember all that, the yelling, just like a Army boot camp. And how you had to do more push-ups the next day and the next day, and that you couldn't move. You just got into the front-leaning rest position, and if you tried to go down, you land flat on your face because you couldn't hold yourself up.
It didn't matter what you did it wrong.
Absolutely.
You did it wrong. If you didn't polish your belt enough, you couldn't understand the cadence of the Marine, Jerry Davenport, oh my goodness, and his cadence. I couldn't understand him for nothing.
Every academy class, if you all remember the police academy movies, that character Tackleberry that is the gun nut and has every type of gun in the world and can shoot any type of gun and 100 meters, shoot a flea's ass. That was Jerry Davenport, former Marine, White House guard for President Carter, as I remember him telling me. But he was that guy, and since he knew how to do the cadence, he was chosen to put us through our running paces. And we ran and ran and ran and ran.
Until the running got done.
Till the running got done.
Yeah.
Right. And then more push-ups and sit-ups and more running. You just mentioned something. Let's talk about the inspections that we had daily for the first, 2/3 of the academy. You mentioned the belt buckle. That was such a sore point for us, as it is for every cadet, because I don't know how much time you spent polishing that buckle the night before with Brasso or whatever it is that we were using. But I polished and polished and polished to make sure there was a mirror shine.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the line inspection, Soto or Anderson would come by and look at you and check your uniform. And then they'd look at your belt buckle, and you knew you polished it, and it's bright and shiny and everything. And then they'd put their thumb on it and say, "You've got a thumbprint on your buckle. Everybody down and give me 10."
Yeah.
It just didn't stop.
Some of the best days I came in were when I didn't polish it. I would spend hours the first couple of days, and they would find something. So I said, you know what? I'm not even going to look at it tonight. And the next day, somehow, lo and behold, we got through. So we still did the push-ups anyway. It didn't matter.
Yeah, that was planned that way.
Yep.
To break us down and then start building us back up.
Yeah.
But the buckle, the threads on the uniform, Vic Cattell, who I sat next to when they put us in alphabetical order, the mornings we looked like monkeys picking lice off of each other, getting the threads off the uniforms. Yeah. Everybody had a little scissor or something. And, you were ready to go for inspection. And they would find something anyway.
Didn't matter.
It didn't matter. The pen, the little black pen. Do you remember how suddenly they flew out of our uniforms out into the middle of the formation? I mean, like they grew wings.
No, I don't recall that.
Yeah, our wonderful TAs would walk by and look at you and
they'd flick it out.
They'd flick it out.
All
exactly. Right. Yeah. And then another 10 push-ups for the class. I always got why we had to get in physical shape, right? We're going to be cops. We're going to get into fights. We're going to get into foot chases, right? We're going to be struggling for our very lives if we don't know how to do those things and we're not in condition to do it. But I think what people outside of police work may not quite understand is all these things and the yelling at us and asking us our codes and we're screwing up and we're doing push-ups and all those things is designed to keep us from losing our minds.
That it is.
And not blowing up on a scene, right? Or at somebody.
But once you understood that in the training, it didn't bother you as much, because if you came in and you let everything bother you, there's the door. You're going to be hitting it real soon, And we had a couple of people that did not make it through the academy, so for different reasons.
One of the things that they did say to us in that first session on the first day before the abuse started that I hold dear because they did us a favor, and both of them had said, before we put all this time and money into you for the next 5 months, because our academies at the time were 5 months, understand that in this job you can get seriously hurt or killed. And if you can't deal with that concept before we start doing all this training, get up and go, walk out.
Yeah, I also remember them saying, look to your right and look to your left. Somebody in your class might not be here at the end of your, I remember that one.
Yeah, they did us a favor by saying those things.
Yeah.
And at the time, no one got up and walked out, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
As you said, it wasn't going to be like that at the end. Do you remember the guy the one guy that got fired from our class?
Well, during the class, I think it was Braun,
Yes.
trainee Braun, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to do traffic stops during lunch hour.
In his Impala
Yeah.
with a portable red light or blue light in his academy uniform.
Yeah. During lunch hour, he went out and tried to practice his traffic stops. Not a good idea.
I remember when they told us Internal Affairs got the complaint, and they went and got a warrant and went into his car and found the light.
Yeah.
And then goodbye, you're done. And the thing about that guy, if you remember, he was going to win the physical fitness award.
No doubt.
He was a stud,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he could do anything that we were doing. It was like he wasn't breathing hard half the time. The rest of us were, struggling because even Mike Stevens, who we mentioned earlier, who was a Marine, well, he hadn't been a Marine for a long time. And as we know, Jerry was a big boy.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't been doing PT for quite a long time. Even when you're in the military, unless you keep up that pace of exercise, you cannot handle it in the academy because no one can. It's just too much, too fast, and too intense. And even Mike was struggling. Maybe not as much as the rest of us. I know I was, the first week or so with that stuff.
Well, trainee Stevens was a marathoner. He was a runner. And we got tested at the beginning of the academy, in the middle, and at the end. And he blew my doors off the first time. And in my mind, I said, by the end of this academy, I've got your number. And he just laughed. And sure enough, the last time, he wasn't going to catch me. I blew his doors off, and I went right by him, and he could not keep up. So
He was good motivation for you.
it was. He carried me. He carried me there, and the other Marine, Davenport, carried me at the range. I don't know if you want to talk about the range now.
Oh, I definitely want to get into that because it's part of our academy experience. Because for those that don't know, you may think that we all grew up shooting guns and all that kind of stuff. Like Jerry, our tackleberry, who grew up in Montana.
Yeah.
So he shot everything, every type of weapon, and so, all right, let's talk about, we'll get into the firearms, and then we'll talk about some of the academic stuff. So we'll fast forward to the firearms. Was that the first time that you ever fired a weapon?
Yes.
Okay, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was foreign to us.
And I was terrible. Here's the target, and I was shooting over there somewhere. It was bad. It was bad.
Pretty much.
Just to say, the passing grade for the first time, I think, was 225. And I think I got a 56 the first time. It was bad. My hand was all over the place.
Well,
So I just didn't like guns. And I was an athlete. I played sports, but I couldn't shoot.
but a firearm's intimidating, your first time holding it, let alone shooting it. Like, oh my God, okay, we got to play with these things, right?
Yeah.
But how do you do it? And back in 1983, folks, we had 6-shot revolvers. We didn't have the semi-autos of today, the fancy Glocks and the Sig Sauers and all that kind of stuff. But our class had the first stainless steel Ruger that was ever issued to the academy classes and then to the department.
You had Rugers. We didn't.
Yeah.
We had Smith.
Okay, and that's what used to be issued. So let me digress for a second. So Carlos was a cadet for Miami Beach Police, and he was one of 3 municipal cadets in the Metro-Dade class. The rest of us were county, the park rangers.
Homestead, Hialeah, and Miami Beach makes
Beach.
me proud because we had one of each.
Yes.
That was part of our running cadence.
Yes. And that's the way the academy classes were set up. It was Metro-Dade classes with some cadets from the municipalities, and it was City of Miami classes with some cadets from the municipalities. But at one time before that, it was a combined Metro-Dade City of Miami class, and a big rivalry fight took care of that, and that never happened again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, the Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles going at it. So that was the end of that. But so did you have your firearm issued by Miami Beach for the academy
Yes.
at the beginning, or did you have to go get it during the academy?
I'd be lying if I told you I remembered. It's too long ago. I don't remember. I don't know.
Okay, so now we're at firearms,
Yeah.
right, for the first time. You have your Smith, we have our Rugers, and they're teaching us, this is the gun. This is what it is. It's a revolver, 6 shots, cylinders. It opens up, it spins, it does all this, the hammer, and all that stuff. For those of us that, we knew what a gun was, but we really didn't know how it worked, which I thought was a little intimidating at the time. And then going out the first time to shoot it. How was that?
It was horrible. The smell, the feel, I just didn't like it. I just didn't like the gun at first. So consequently, the first time I went to shoot, I was horrible. And I got a little better, and I actually passed by the last time. But if we go back to Jerry Davenport, I'm not going to name him name because I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but he actually put 6 rounds in somebody's target to pass them through.
I remember that.
And if he didn't do that, that guy wouldn't be here. And it ended up being that guy was an exemplary officer for 30 years.
Yeah.
And, but he, that's the teamwork we had. Jerry was going to get a perfect 300 every time he shot. So when he came up with a 290, they said, "What happened?" "I don't know. Must have been the wind, sir."
Yeah, the firearms instructors knew Jerry was the guy, and he never missed.
Yeah, 300. I mean, maybe he got a 299 twice we qualified 5 times. He got 300 every time, except for the other 2. Yeah.
So the course of fire. We started at the 50-yard line, standing and prone. The target, I think, looked about that big at the 50-yard line.
Yeah.
Right? And they were black targets back then. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what it looked like. I could barely see it, let alone know if I hit it. And we had to do, 6 standing, 6 prone, and then we move up to the 25-yard line and do it there, and then the 15, the 7, and the 3. Like you, I wasn't good at this. It wasn't something that I did on the side or for sport. I did some martial arts and boxing, and I liked that kind of stuff. I never did any firearms. My brother, different. He came on the job 2 years after me, but he came right out of the Army. And he's been a hunter since he was a teenager. And it was second nature to him, but it's not second nature to you and me and many of the others. So shooting out there, it was very stressful. I found it stressful.
It's the whole environment, not just the shooting. All the abuse continued, not just the push-ups.
Right.
If you didn't do something right, you were doing push-ups. And I remember clearly once we all had to run to the gate and run back. And when you come back, make sure you bring a blade of grass. Run to the end, bring the blade of grass. And this one guy presented the blade of grass and said, "I said a female blade of grass. Now go back and get the right one." Huh? And the guy who knew the trick, he brought 2 blades of grass. He goes, "Male, female." We didn't know that. We didn't know the trick. I guess that was a military thing.
It was, because my brother had experienced that in boot camp. And he did it in his academy class, but with the TAs he had at the time, they said get a rock.
Uh-huh.
So since he already knew the game, he came running back and he opened up and they said, "Gonzalez, that's the wrong rock." And then my brother turns around and does this. "You bastard, you son of a bitch, go back and do it all over again."
Yeah.
You mentioned the abuse, the stress inspections at the academy in firearms. Not at the academy, but at the firearms range with the firearms instructors, the red shirts. Not only do they need red shirts so we know who the firearms guys are, so they stand out, but it's also quite intimidating during a stress inspection, when you got red shirts yelling at you, screaming at you. And those were the inspections on steroids compared to at the academy.
Oh, they were in your face and loud again. And it was very stressful, but for a reason. Yeah. We're here today probably because of those.
Mike Stevens, who we talked about, the Marine. He had the Marine Corps tattoo like almost every Marine gets.
Right.
And I remember he was near me, and I was watching this, and 3 firearms instructors ganged up on him, and they were making fun of his tattoo. "Oh, the Marine Corps tattoo? Okay. We want you to sing the Marine Corps hymn. Do it now," right? Yeah. And Mike stood his ground and he said, "Sirs, I will not disrespect the Marine Corps by singing the hymn at this time. And they didn't know what to say, and they walked away from him. And they left him alone. The rest of the time, the 2 weeks we were there, they didn't mess with him anymore.
Guess he couldn't sing.
He couldn't sing, or they didn't expect that.
Yeah.
Because any cadet's going to buckle under,
Yeah.
and do what they're told. So, all right, with that, we're going to take a hard break here for a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up with the academy again.
All right.
All right, cool.
Good.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with my first guest, Lieutenant Carlos Devarona from Miami Beach PD, retired. And it's all started in the academy like it did for all of us. So we're going to get back to talking a little bit about the academy, and then we'll go on to graduation and then out on the street. So we were talking about firearms training.
Yes.
And the stress inspections and how they messed with us and all that. Do you remember qualification day that Friday?
I remember that I was nervous as hell because I wasn't going to pass. I didn't think I was, and I did. I know it meant something different for you.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just another day,
And I'm glad it was.
Mm-hmm.
So you alluded to that it was a different day for me.
Yeah.
So the night before we started the academy, that was February 7th, my father had a seizure. And he was rushed to the hospital by fire rescue. And he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So now he's going through all the diagnostics and the treatment, all through the the beginning part of the academy until we went to firearms, 2 months into the academy, whatever it was. And that Friday qualification day is the day he was having the brain tumor removed at South Miami Hospital. Needless to say, my mind wasn't on firearms, which made it so much worse for me because I wasn't good at it to begin with, just learning, and then him having the tumor removed. But, in consultation with my mother, I went to class that day, and because it was qualification day, she told me not to miss it because I wanted to be at the hospital with my father. So we went through the qualification. I did not qualify. And as I recall, there were 7 other members of our class that didn't qualify that day. Not for the same reason I didn't, of course, but because they were new to it as well, and it was stressful, and they just didn't qualify. So I found out at the end of the day, my father came through the surgery okay. They excised the tumor. And now, I could go visit him in the hospital over the weekend. And then on Monday, those of us that didn't qualify had to go back to firearms while the rest of the class went back to the academy to continue with the class. And that day, if we didn't qualify, that was it. Fortunately, we all did. I was more relaxed now knowing my father was okay.
Yeah.
Now, having gone through that on that Friday, I'm going to fast forward a little bit to our careers out on the street where we had to qualify every year or every other year for the state standards. And the reason I mention this is because of what happened in the academy, and then I never spoke about this almost to anybody until after I was retired. But every time that I went to annual qualification, when I stood on that line, it took me back to that day that my father was having the tumor removed.
It's a hard thing to go through.
And I
put it
was
together.
so stressed every 2 years or every year, whenever we did it, about qualifying, because I was thinking about that day. And there was one time early in my career, I was at the gym. And I was there with a sergeant of ours from Station 5, where I had started my career. And I was so nervous about qualification the next day, I went to the bathroom to throw up. And this really is one of the first times that I'm talking about this publicly, because I was embarrassed. I had trouble. And there's times where, one or two times I went to remedial training afterwards because I just couldn't do it. I was just so stressed out. But that day in the gym, I was sweating profusely, getting sick, so nervous, and had to go deal with this the next day. I actually had to go to our psychological services unit to work through this problem. I know I'm not the only one, but at that time in my world, I was the only one, right? I didn't think anybody else really was going through what I was going through. So we qualified that Monday, got through it, and then we continued on with the rest of the academy. So we'll go back now. The academic stuff that we had to do. We had the firearms. Academics was a big part. We had the legal block we had to learn.
Right.
What did you find difficult with all the academic stuff we had to do, if anything at all?
Not so much difficult. It's just I was never a good written test taker, so I would have to do everything possible to get through that test. I would have to do cards. I know we got together as a team, too. We would meet at our different places, and I remember going to Jerry Davenport's once with Hollerin. Oh, my goodness, Hollerin.
Bobby Hollerin.
Oh, my goodness. Now I'm bringing back memories of other people. But it was so nice to have a nice team of people to study together.
Yeah.
Because there's no way, I don't think I'd get through without it. You know.
I wasn't a great studier either. School like you, I was a good student when I wanted to be and applied the effort.
Right.
But I was bored with school and I didn't like going to school, except for gym class and sports afterwards. But same thing in the academy. Now we had to buckle down because now this meant something. This is going to be our career. And failure is not an option.
Correct.
Now, if we failed, all right, so now it's a block test. It was for us after every academic block. And if you failed, you had one other chance to make it. I didn't fail any blocks. I don't think you did either.
No.
But we did have a couple of people that did fail. And I remember this one young kid we had that was always joking around. He didn't take it seriously enough, in my opinion. Chris, right?
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. And a great kid, but he was the most immature in our class for sure.
Yeah. I think he was all of 19 years old.
Yeah, which even though you can apply at 19, that means he applied at 19 and he got hired at 19 very quickly. And at that time, from my application to going into the academy was 7 months, which nowadays is unheard of. But we needed to grow so much, Metro-Dade, City of Miami, the beach, because of the Cocaine Cowboys, the boat lift, the 80 riots. So the departments had to expand very quickly.
Yeah.
So I got hired fast. And then, of course, when I applied, I was 21 years old. I didn't have much of a history, so it wasn't hard for them to do the background investigation.
It was tough for me going out in the street, being 21, 22 years old. I was not streetwise. I was court-wise and field-wise. I could play the sports. I could handle everything on the court. Right. But on the street, I wasn't a street person.
Yeah.
That was tough for me.
Yeah. Getting past the tests, and now we have the defensive tactics stuff that,
What?
Yeah, exactly. I remember the instructors, one or two of them were from Hialeah Police as defensive tactics instructors. And all the stuff we had to do, the fighting, even though it was limited. And I personally don't think it was enough. I had started jiu-jitsu when I was 18 years old, so I already knew how to fight, how to throw, how to fall, all those things, some of the grappling moves. But a lot of kids coming in at 19, 20 years old have never done anything like that.
It was not enough. There's no way we should. I hope they get more now. I don't know what they get now. But
they do.
MMA, any kind of training, we didn't get enough training.
On that note, as you know, I'm writing opinion editorials for ThinkAmerican.news. And I recently wrote one where I cited Kash Patel, the new director of the FBI,
Right.
wanting to bring MMA training in for the agents.
Mm-hmm.
And I said in my article that I think it's a good idea. Every law enforcement officer in the country should do that. But more than the agents, the people that need are the patrol officers, because they're going to get into it day to day. Agents do not.
Right.
They do investigations long term. They're doing background checks. They're doing surveillances and things. They're not interacting with subjects every day like your average patrol officer. As soon as you leave the station, you probably got the first call out of the box, and you're dealing with a subject, and it could be a physical altercation. So they don't really deal with that. But yes, MMA training or some kind of extended defensive tactics training throughout the career is needed.
Right.
Not just that little bit that we got in the academy.
But there's one part of the training that I do remember, and I think might have saved my life the one day, because I remember being behind Burger King on 41st Street in Miami Beach with my partner when, he was in the bathroom or something, and we start wrestling with this one guy, and he went right for my gun. He was going to get my gun, and I always remember gun retention. Hold the gun in, and I'm screaming for my partner to come in, and I'm holding the gun in. And this guy's pounding me with his other hand, but he's trying to get the gun with and I'm just holding it.
Yeah.
And my partner finally comes in and takes him out, and that's it. End of story. But
yeah,
holding on to that gun, your gun.
At that time for us, the statistic was that 50% of all officers shot in the U.S. were shot with their own gun.
Yeah. And in our academy, there was one at Westland Mall. Officer Mieres from Hialeah. He was a motorcycle officer.
Okay.
And they took his gun and held him, made him go down on his knees, and then shot him in front of witnesses. That was during our academy. So that always stuck in my head, just to hold on to that gun.
Fast forward out of the academy, our first Christmas Eve on the job, I'm at Station 5. And that night, Bobby Zor was in the crime prevention unit, and they were working a plainclothes detail that evening because of robberies and stuff like that around Dayland Mall. And he found what he thought was the subject based on the bolo of a robbery that had occurred just a little while earlier. And he was at the payphones at the park and ride behind Dayland. Bobby approached him alone, and he got into a struggle. He wasn't wearing his regular uniform with, the safety holster and all that, the security holster. The subject got his gun away from him, shot him, got in the car, Bobby's car, the unmarked, and fled. Since he was at a payphone, Bobby dialed 911, and I remember hearing this later. While Bobby's telling the 911 call taker he was just shot by the subject he confronted, took his gun, took his car, the guy came back and shot Bobby again, and we heard it on the recording. Bobby was rushed to South Miami Hospital, and later that evening, he died. And that was my first on-duty death,
right?
Of a colleague.
Mm-hmm.
So the gun retention, since you mentioned it, and it brought me right to that. Like we all have the stories, and you say something or someone says something,
sure.
And boom, you go right there. You fast forward. It could be 6 months. It could be 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? Or you say something today, and now that we're retired, it takes you right back to that moment. But yeah, gun retention, while it was good and it saved you then, it didn't save Bobby for whatever reason. None of us were on the scene, so we don't know exactly what happened. But
right.
Or the Hialeah guy.
Mieres. Yeah.
But yes, very important. I don't think we do enough of that. First in the academy and then during our careers.
Right.
Because once you're done, you got to do it on your own.
Yeah.
So, the defensive tactics. I remember, sir, when we were getting ready for the test, the defensive tactics test, that weekend, some of us went down to the Keys, to Key Largo, and we spent the Sunday out on a little Hobie Cat, on jet skis, drinking beer, blowing off steam. And what I ended up getting was a really good sunburn, right? I mean, cooked, right? We all did, but I particularly got burnt. And since I had done jiu-jitsu before, for the test, I was the ookie or dummy for 5 other cadets. So I could throw them or they could throw me and I could land and make them look good during the throws, right? So not only did I have to do my own test, I had to do it 5 more times with the other guys. You know how much that hurt?
Didn't hurt me at all.
It didn't hurt you at all, of course.
Not at all.
That was terrible. And it taught me a valuable lesson. We're in South Florida. Put sunscreen on or put a shirt on or something like that. But that was really hard. It hurt a lot. But we all got through it. Everybody passed, which was good. So let's fast forward to graduation. What do you remember the most about graduation?
Ooh, I don't know if I want to say that. Because when I made a comment to one of our trainees, it was not accepted well. And maybe I'll tell you this one off camera. I'm not going to do that. But she handled it differently, and it changed my perspective on this person for forever. But I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to take the high road.
You saying that does remind me of one incident during the academy. Remember this?
Yo, the coin toss.
The coin toss. Pitching nickels.
Pitching nickels against the wall.
Right.
I think, how many? Seven officers?
5, I think.
Yeah, they decided to test their skills with pitching nickels against the wall. And Lattimore, I think, was the trainer, the teacher.
Professor Lattimore. You understanding human behavior.
I never understood the man anyway, but he came out and said that those guys were gambling and they should be fired. And wow, that was rough. That was not simple.
That was on a Friday.
Yeah.
And one of the guys we mentioned earlier, Vic, was involved in that. And what I learned about that is never give cadets downtime with nothing to do, right?
Yeah.
Because in their mind, we had an instructor that didn't show.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of that. So now you've got an hour of nothing to do. So they're in the hallway and, all right, pitching nickels. Harmless in our minds, right? Well, I remember Vic, and Vic and I were assigned to a couple of the same places during our career. And whenever he mentioned it, he said, that weekend, thinking they were going to get fired was the most stressful weekend of his life up until that point.
Yeah.
So they had to come in and they had to write the dreaded memo of what I did, I'll never do it again, I swear, that type of thing. And the lieutenant in charge of the academy didn't fire him, fortunately. Okay, put it in the rearview mirror, and never do that again.
And those were 5 good guys. They were not gambling. They were just wasting time. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So back to our graduation. Do you remember how the ceremony went? What was unique about our ceremony over all the other ones?
Darth Vader was our speaker.
T.A. Dave Tips.
See, I didn't remember the name because he was one of your park rangers.
Park rangers, yeah. Sorry.
But he came in dressed in the Darth Vader costume, and got up there and doing all his breathing. Holy crap! What is he doing? But it came across pretty good.
Representing the dark side.
Yeah, he was amazing. That guy was amazing.
That was fantastic because that showed the way he depicted it, what we were going to be facing out on the street.
We have that on video anywhere?
I'm sure they do someplace.
God. This was amazing. Yeah.
Dave Tips is on Facebook. I found him.
Yeah.
I could write to him and ask him, to see if he's got it.
I'd like to see that again.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So graduation day, we do that, and then the most important thing in our careers up until that point, the badge pinning.
Right.
And for those that don't know, your police fire, you get to pick the person that pins your badge on you for the very first time. Who was it for you?
My dad, ex-police officer from Cuba, stepped right up, put the badge on.
Yeah.
And then later on, when I got promoted to sergeant, my mom pinned the badge on me. And then when I got to be a lieutenant, it was my kids. So I always picked someone that meant something to me.
Yeah. I picked my father as well. Of course, he was very sick at the time.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to me or my family, since we graduated today, June 17, 1983, January 26th, 1984 is when he finally succumbed to his illness. The cancer just went everywhere, and 56 years old. But I have that picture. It's in the book, and it's on my website because that was so important to me for him to be able to do that. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps at General Electric. I didn't want anything to do with that. Right? Be stuck in an office and, that type of thing. It just wasn't me. I'm like you. I want to be outdoors, sports, and all that kind of stuff. So looking back, I think we kind of picked the right profession for us, for our personalities.
I do have a picture of my dad shaking my hand, but then we recreated the badge pinning at the station with, believe it or not, our chief at the time was Jack Webb. And in his office, I have a picture of him, putting the badge on, which was kind of cool. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're out of the academy, finally. 5 months. I didn't like the academy for the most part. I didn't care for it. I can't put my finger on exactly why. Maybe the commute had a lot to do with it. It was very stressful. And then, of course, my stress with firearms and my father. But I do know that by the end of the academy, we were running 5 miles like nobody's business. Right? I mean, I didn't barely breathing hard and sprinting at the end and all that stuff. Boy, that's never happened again, right? Yeah. So, all right. So now we graduate and you go off to Miami Beach.
Yes.
Right. So how was it early on first starting with the beach?
It was rough for me. Again, I was not streetwise. And so here I am in the academy with a bunch of Miami-Dade police officers.
Metro.
So, yeah, them too. And they're looking after their own. They're not really focusing on me too much. They're focusing more on their fellow park rangers. So, they get the I got trained well. I mean, I had guys around me that were really, really top notch. All that was good. But now I go out to the street, and I'm not streetwise, and I fumbled the ball a bunch of times. And so,
as did we all.
You have 3 months of FTO program in Miami Beach. I don't know if it's the same for you.
Same thing.
So I was extended a 4th. On the 3rd one, I was brought into the captain's office, and the captain and the major are there, and they said, "We don't think you're cut out for this job, son." Actually, they said, boy.
It kind of was the time back then in the early 80s in Dade County.
And I said, well, sir, I respectfully would want another try. I want another chance. I don't want to give up. And they both said, that's what we wanted to hear. Go back out there. And so they if I would have given up, they would have let me give. But they wanted to hear me say,
right,
I still want to do it. So I remember going to an incident with a guy had a knife, and he was at a store, 8th Street in Washington, and I remember it like it was yesterday. There was a bunch of cops all over this guy on the ground, and he had the knife. And what was interesting about this is he was holding the wrong end of the knife. He was holding the blade end of the knife. So blood is pouring out all over the place, and I'm seeing 6 guys on top of this guy already, and I don't know how to get in there, And my FTO goes, you need to get in there now. I go, where? But I had to find a spot and dive in, but there's blood everywhere. And we finally were able to take him in, but that was a rough moment. I just didn't know what to do sometimes. I didn't know when to step in, when not to. But
it happens with all of us.
Yeah.
We're all new at this. We're wet behind the ears. And you're looking at your FTO for guidance. But then it comes that time where your FTO is going to throw you in the pool and say, swim. And all of us. And then in turn, we as FTOs did the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? So Miami Beach, a unique place.
Certainly is.
Right, to say the least. So everybody from outside of the South Florida area, when they hear Miami Beach, they think, of course, of South Beach. Right? Scarface, the movies, and all that stuff.
Miami Vice, all that.
Yeah. So the beach itself, What was it like having Miami Beach out there, the beach, proper, but then you have all the other glitz and stuff that comes with that. But in the early 80s, like Ocean Drive wasn't like that. It was the old dilapidated hotels.
It wasn't like that at all.
Right.
It was a bunch of old people. We call them the blue-haired people. And we would be sent out there once a shift, one of us, to go out there to watch them dance in the middle of 8th Street and Ocean Drive. You had to go there and, oh my goodness. And there were some really neat old people there. And interestingly enough, I met people that were born in the 1800s and people that had the numbers from the concentration camps on them. And the stories that they told, oh man, that was something else. But it wasn't all glitzy at first. Miami Beach was not like that. Right. It wasn't at all.
I remember a lot of the old concentration camp victims. I ran into a lot of them myself that were here located in Miami, the general area. And I remember the tattoos on the arms. And then, of course, as a 20-something-year-old, you're aware of what happened, but you're not really aware of what happened.
It means so much more to me now.
Yes.
But I remember it. I still remember.
Yeah. When was the transition starting in Miami Beach?
Well, there was a vote, and it was either Art Deco or casinos. And those were the two options. And Art Deco won out. Casinos, the big money was being poured in. Let's do the casinos.
Yeah.
But the thing was, you had to have at least 500 rooms to have a casino. They wouldn't allow you to have it unless you had 500 rooms. So there weren't that many hotels that had that many rooms.
That's a big hotel.
Right. So consequently, Art Deco won out. And for me, thankfully it did, because it was night and day what happened to Miami Beach then. All the old buildings got refurbished.
Yeah.
All the facades were still there. It's a beautiful place. All the colors that come out in movies.
And a lot of the older people either died out or were moved out.
Yeah.
Someplace else. One of the things, so I worked for Metro-Dade, Miami-Dade Police, unincorporated Dade County, the county sheriff out here in more the western part of the county.
So you didn't do much then?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Not at all. So we didn't have a lot of business on the beach unless our business took us there.
Right.
Right. And that's rare because you're on an island out there. You got to cross all the causeways to get there, and then that's your kingdom out there. And it's unique unto itself, maybe anywhere in the country. Miami's called the American Riviera, but the Riviera part they're talking about is Miami Beach, because it ain't the Everglades, right? Even though they're cool unto itself or whatever, that you may enjoy, but the beach is unique. And where do we all go here to relax and stuff? We go to Miami Beach, right?
Right.
So one thing you guys had a lot of out there that we didn't really have a lot inside Dade County. A lot of celebrity stuff going on.
Yeah.
Because they all either they were performers or they came here on vacation to party and whatnot. So what was it like? What were some of the people that you met during your travels that came here to enjoy themselves
I met
or get in trouble?
Princes from other countries. Prince Albert from Monaco. That's a story in itself. My chief told me, hey, Prince Albert's coming in. He's going to go to the club. Do what you have to make sure he stays out of trouble. Make sure there's no trouble. I said, Chief, what does that mean? We had a policy. We couldn't go in the clubs unless there was a call, and we went in as a team and all this stuff. And he says, Carlos, make sure he doesn't have any trouble. Do whatever you have to do. I said, okay, Chief. So here comes Prince Albert. Limo comes up, and I closed off Espanola Way for the Cameo Theater where he was going to go in. Closed it off for, get him in, no problem. Now I change out of my uniform and go in to be close to him, make sure he has no problems. At about 20 minutes before he's about to leave, his security guy goes, hey, he wants to leave. I said, okay, let me go out there and change. I go out and change. I close down Espanola Way again. It's a Friday night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Clock's ticking. 10 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 35. Where the heck? I've got the road closed. What's going on here? Police car pulls up right in front of me with his lights on. He goes, hey, boss. Yeah. Goes, you know why Prince Albert's still in there? I said, no. He said, his credit card's no good. Prince Albert's one of the richest men in the world. What do you mean his credit card's no good? So I turned to the producer, the person who did this trip, who put it together. I said, Barbara, how much is the bill? She says, $3,200. I said, pay the bill. Let's get him out of here. I can't keep the street closed. She said, Carlos, are you sure? Come on, it's Prince Albert, not Diddy. Anyway, so she pays the bill, and we get him in the car, and we escort him all the way to the airport. We get him out of there, no problems, right? That's now 2:30 in the morning. 8 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings. I left at 5. 8 o'clock, the chief's calling. Carlos, why did you detain Prince Albert? What? What are you talking about, Chief? Because I got a picture of a police car in front of his limo with lights on, and you were arguing with him? No. What are you? So I explained to him what happened, and he goes, you sure? He goes, yeah. So that's it. The chief lets it go. Next week in the National Enquirer front page, Prince Albert argues with police and the people at the club, and they struggle with him, and they fought, and he was drunk. And I said none of that was true, but that's the National Enquirer, and that's Prince Albert. That's the story for Prince Albert. That's that one.
I don't think it's just the National Enquirer.
Yeah,
I think it's the media in general. Because
Yeah.
I have been on police scenes where later on in the news they're running it because they show up if it bleeds it leads for the 6 o'clock news, and they come out and do their piece, and I'm there hearing the reporters. I see it later on at night on the news, and
the whole nother story.
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Wasn't like that. But okay, that's typical.
So I'm wearing a shirt. Here's Bad Boys 4. This was from the filming of, Will Smith's and Martin Lawrence's movie that they did on the beach. That was this year. So my connections with the movie industry are still intact today. They call me to come out to see them film, and I love it. I go out there and I hang out.
How many film shoots have you been involved in over there?
Ooh, how many?
You think?
Oh my! Ooh. I can't give a number, but if George Clooney, Will Smith multiple times. I mean, you name the Burt Reynolds was one of my favorites because Burt's dad was a chief of police up in North Florida. So when he would come in, we had a great time. But all the rappers, all the football players, basketball, you name it, they all came to Miami Beach. Everybody. Stallone, Jimmy Buffett.
Talk about Shaq.
Shaq was one of our reserve cops.
Yeah.
So we actually pieced together a uniform for him because, the man is huge. Tall and wide and but the nicest guy. And he would come into the office looking for chocolate. So I'd be at my desk and you'd see a shadow because he'd be blocking the sun. Like, what is that? Oh, hey, Shaq, how you doing? He goes, where's chocolate? The M&M thing's right over here. Go help yourself. So he'd come in and get chocolate. He had a plainclothes looking police car, that it's a police car.
Right.
He had one. And he had the front seat removed, and his seat was moved back further so he could drive around. And he would come back from a game and be in town at 2, 3 in the morning. He'd roll up on a scene, and he'd roll the window down this much and say, you guys all right? And, yeah, Shaq, we're good. Because we didn't need him getting out of the car because he would have been a distraction just to say the least. So he was always cool. What he liked to do, child exploitation, he would help us with that. He would make phone calls. He would do things on the computer to try and get people to come in and do things that they weren't supposed. So that's what he liked to do with us. He helped us.
Right.
But he was always a bigger than life figure. Nice guy, and just his father was a sergeant in the Army,
Right.
and he just loved the uniform, and he still to this day I think is a reserve somewhere.
He is.
Wherever
He
he
is.
works, he's a reserve. Wherever he lives.
He's going to be a chief or an elected sheriff someday.
Yeah,
That's really what he wants.
he just loves it. But I have so many stories. I could go on and on about celebrities.
Dennis Rodman and Carmen Electra.
Ooh.
Did you happen to be on that scene?
Yeah, but not by choice. Shift change. I was on midnights and the shift is about to end. And so the call goes out, and I said, day shift is coming on in 2 minutes. I didn't even know it was Dennis Rodman. I knew it was a disturbance at the Bentley Hotel at 5th Street and Ocean Drive. And I said, it's domestic, it's going to be a minute. So day shift, sure enough, comes on, and thank goodness they came on and took this call, because it was Dennis Rodman and Carmen Electra. And they went at it, and they both ended up going to jail, which is not the norm in a domestic. You know, should I talk about what exactly happened? I don't know.
No, I mean, it's public record.
Okay. So Dennis was face down. Now, I know this is an ugly picture to begin with, face down on the bed. And Carmen comes in and thought it would be funny to present a rose with thorns into Dennis. And when that happens, he just reacts. Boom! And so she's got the mark here. He's got marks elsewhere. And they both ended up going to jail. So, and it's a shame, because Dennis was always good to us.
Right.
As a matter of fact, after a game once, should I even say? Okay, so I gave him a hat that said Miami Beach Police on it. And after the game, he wore it, smoking a cigar, no shirt, all the tattoos, you know, all the rings. And our chief had us at roll call the next day and go, who the hell gave him a hat? You know, and it's like, I don't know. Where'd you get the hat from? I don't know. So, sorry, Chief DeLuca, it was me. Yeah, I gave him the hat. So, that's with Dennis.
What is the most serious problem that one of these celebrities ever caused you guys?
Well, there was a lot of drinking going on. I remember a football player for the Dolphins. I'm not going to say his name. I don't want to do that to the guy.
That's okay.
He was drunk, and I went out to the car.
Like a lot of athletes.
And I said, listen, if you go down the block here, you're going to get arrested. You should not be driving. Don't even get in that car. And he thanked me. He got somebody else to drive, and he might have gotten in the car around the block, but I stopped him from getting in the car at that moment.
Yeah.
And biggest problems, I can't think of any problems off the top of my head. I know most of the things with me were good. We didn't have, I know Diddy, again, go back to Diddy, the one time when
Are you on his list?
I'm on his list.
Are you on his list?
What kind of list is that? I just know
the one they're bringing up on the news now during his trial.
I don't know anything about the lotion and all that. I don't know nothing about that. But
You sure?
Yeah,
You're clear memory on that.
clear crystal. But he showed up at a club. It was the same night I had to keep two celebrities out of the club. Chris Pacello, notorious gang member, but whatever, he ended up going to prison. Actually, Chris was a nice guy. I shouldn't say he's notorious to me, but he did go to jail for a bunch of things. Anyway, Chris says, I do not want Mariah, and I do not want Puffy to come in today. So I meet Mariah first, go to the car. The valet, he's Argentinian, he goes, Mariah Carey's here. I said, who? Mariah Carey. What? And I look, and it's Mariah Carey. I said, oh, Mariah Carey. I go over to the car. I said, I'm sorry, you can't go in. She would show up with like 40 people.
Right.
And wanted everything calmed. And so Chris said, no, if she comes in with 10, whatever. So she goes off. Now it's Diddy's turn. So Diddy comes in through the back, and he decides wants to get in the club. And hey, Chris said no. So he leaves, and he comes back. There had to be 30 or 40 mopeds. Guy in the front, girl in the back, all dressed in camouflage, fatigues, masks around their heads, and they're ready to fight. And one of our officers, a sergeant, Pete Batumi, grabs Diddy by the shirt. He says, if we're going to fight here, maybe some people will get hurt, maybe some people will go to jail. You're getting hurt, and you're going to jail. So so he said he went like this, and he cut everything off, and everybody left. Because what I think was going to happen was everybody's just going to throw punches, and you couldn't tell who was who with the masks on, you know. Right. So Pete Batumi may God can he rest in peace? He saved the day that day. And sometimes I get credit for it, but it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But hey, Diddy, to me, was always a nice guy. He actually congratulated me when I got promoted, left his Ferrari-type vehicle across the street, ran across the street, asked me when I got promoted. I said, last night. He goes, he gave me a hug, got back in his car and drove off.
So, welcome back from the hard break. We're here with my academy buddy and lifelong friend now, Lieutenant Carlos Devarona from the Miami Beach Police Department. And we were talking about his time on the Miami Beach PD and the uniqueness of working the beach. As the rest of us in Miami-Dade County call it, when we refer to them, we call them the beach. We have Coral Gables, we call the Gables. In City of Miami, we call the City. So we all have our nicknames for each other. What is your nickname for us?
Park Rangers.
Park Rangers, okay. But, yeah, we have brown. We look like Park Rangers. But I have hair.
Hair's overrated.
No, it's not. Not at all.
Chicks dig the bald look.
That's what bald guys say.
Yeah.
So, now, we know this about our culture. We've seen so many things. We've done so many things. And we've all got stories to tell, right? I mean, we could sit for hours and hours, days and days, and just tell stories back and forth. But when I wrote the book, I put in my stories there, but I needed to legitimize my stories for the non-law enforcement reader to show them that I'm not unique as a cop, that these things happen to all of us all over the country, and basically in the civilized Western world. We're all basically the same. So we all have stories, and at the end of the book, I have what I call stories from the fringe. And that's everybody else that told a story that contributed to the book. So your story that you graciously offered for the book. I found it quite riveting, the way the events unfolded with this one particular officer of yours.
I was sitting, we have the main station and we have what's called the North End mini station. I was seated at the North End mini station.
And you were what position at the time?
I believe, I think I was a lieutenant at the time already. I don't know if I was a sergeant or lieutenant. That kind of blurs now. 18 years retired, it's starting to blur. But I was at the desk and the phone rang. And before I get the phone at the same time, Officer Gotts is raising me on the radio. He's saying, hey, I need to talk to you. Could you come over here? He says, well, what do you need? He says, no, could you please come over here? Okay. I didn't know what he needed. At the same time, the phone rings. I pick it up. It's the neighboring police department, North Miami Beach Police Department. And they say they've had an accident. They've had a drowning at their lake. Oleta State Park. And in the back pocket, they had a little paper saying, please contact Demetrius Gotsis. So the guy on the radio, on the phone, tells me, he asked me, do you have a Demetrius Gotsis? I said, no, we have a Jimmy Gotsis. But I don't know if that's his real name or if it's Demetrius or Jimmy. So it says, it says, please contact Demetrius Gotsis, Miami Beach Police Department. It must be Jimmy. So what Jimmy was calling me about was there was a bus that hit a girl who was on a bicycle. And it sounds like a terrible accident. Normally it is. Bike against a bus, who's going to win?
Bus wins.
So the bus kind of just nudged the bike over, and she fell to the ground, and her bike got all messed up, and she got scratches all over her. But she was fine. But Jimmy wanted to give her a ride and the bike all the way down to South Beach. We're about 7 miles away. I don't know this yet. So now when Miami-Dade has a bus accident, it takes forever. They have to have a supervisor come from their department to clear the scene. So we have all the road blocked up by this bus. So I put my lights and siren on and I go around the wrong way in traffic and I get to where Jimmy is. And as I pull up, I see him talking or doing the accident report, and he goes, "Hey, boss," and he starts coming toward me, and I said, "Jimmy, listen, before you get into what you need," he says, "I need to ask you something." He says, "Do you have a brother?" He goes, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Well, there's been an accident up at Alita State Park." And he just started panicking. And Jimmy is the most ripped guy in our department. He had muscle upon muscle, veins. He just a workout animal. Veins in his neck, and he starts to fidget a little bit. And I said, "Jimmy, there was an accident. There was possibly a drowning." And he falls to his knees, puts his hands on his head, and he starts screaming, "No, no!" He says, "First, my mother. This happened to my mother 2 or 3 years ago. She was killed." And now my brother, no, no, I can't take this. And I'm going, no, no. So he was on the FTO program. His trainer was David, Super Dave, we called him. I said, "Dave, take Jimmy up to North Miami. Take as much time as you need. Forget the shift. Help him find out because his brother might have drowned up at Alita State Park." He goes, "Okay." So he walks away with Jimmy. I turn to the girl, and she says, "What happened to the officer? I saw him screaming." She said, "Well," I told her, I said, he might have found out his brother drowned up at Alita State Park. She said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, he drowned at Alita State Park." She starts screaming, "Wow, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I was there. I was there at Alita State Park. I saw him drown, and now I get hit by a bus, and who does the report? Her brother, his brother." I said, "I can't take this. This is too much." I said, "Wow, okay." So I get her a ride down to the south end, and that's the end of it. Jimmy goes up, and it was, in fact, his brother. But that, again, not the end of the story. A couple of years go by, and we have two people out in the ocean at about 11 or 12 at night. And we go out to the beach, and we don't hear anything. We see it's dark. You can't hear anything. And everybody, fire, police, everybody leaves, including myself. We leave the beach except for Jimmy Gotsis.
So there was possible overturned boat out there, capsized
There was
boat
a
or
drowning.
something?
There was people out in the water, is all we got it as. So Jimmy stays, everybody leaves. Next thing you know, he's getting on the radio saying, "Hey, I'm going into the water. There's somebody out in the water. I hear somebody." And he puts his radio down, takes his uniform and gun belt off, leaves it with a citizen, and says, "Watch this till the cops get here." And he starts swimming out toward wherever he hears the noise. And of course, all the police and fire come back, and here comes Jimmy hauling some guy, back in. He saved the guy's life, and he's about to go back in. And I said, "No, no, no. Our job as supervisors is to protect our officers. So if I would have kept him from going in the water, I would have, because we have boats, we have other means to go out there, and we don't need to lose somebody like that if needlessly. If we have to, we have to go out." But I stopped him. The fire department went out and saved another person. There was two people out there in the water that Jimmy saved that day by going back out. And he turns to me and he says, "Hey, you know why I did it, boss, right?" I said, "Your brother?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." Because in reality, as a supervisor, going against what we're supposed to do, it's quite possible I could have written a reprimand, but there's no way I could do that. I actually wrote him Officer of the Month. I think he got Officer of the Year that year.
Yeah.
Based on that. So anyway, that's the whole story, the Jimmy Gotsis story. So he saved two people.
The incredible and unfortunate coincidences
Yeah.
involved in this whole story, from the girl that witnessed it that ended up getting in the accident,
Yeah.
and then he gets there. I mean, when I first read your story,
Yeah.
I could feel it. I could feel what you were trying to convey, and I could feel what Jimmy was going through. Even though it didn't happen to me, it didn't happen directly to you. Let's say, um,
It's a Gonzalez trait. Okay.
dropping stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but still, just having felt that, and it was like one of those, okay, only in police work can you say, something like this happened,
Yeah.
right? Because we get so involved with everybody else's issues and life stories. But I really appreciate you giving me that story for the book because it's so important. These are the stories that we all talk about, and that's why I said it adds legitimacy to what I was saying throughout the book. That I have my stories, you have your stories, and our colleagues and friends, they have their stories. My son, who's on the job, he has his stories now, 13 years in, and we did a lifetime there,
Yeah.
and it was incredible. Um, One last Miami Beach question.
Go ahead.
So, if anybody's familiar with South Beach, they've heard of Joe's Stonecrap.
Never heard of it. Yeah.
What is your Joe's story? Because I know you have one.
I have many. Joe's is like a third family to me. I mean, I have my family, my police family, and my Joe's family. So, do I have a story at Joe's? I have the Muhammad Ali story. I have so many stories.
Okay, but your relationship with the ownership of Joe's.
Um, I could call the owner right now and say, "Hey, I'm coming down with a couple of people." And so the story I think you're searching for now is we had a guy that we went to the academy with. His name was Mike Edelstein. Mike's about 6'5". He was a cop in Chicago, and then he became a cop in L.A. He was bouncing all over the place. But he calls me on a Friday night and says, "Hey, I want to get into Joe's." And I said, "Man, it's Friday. It's packed." So I turn to the maitre d' who's busy, and I figured I'm not going to go to him because he's too busy. I go to the second in command, Ed. I said, "Ed, listen, I've got 4 cops from Chicago." He says, "Carlos, bring them. Just bring them." I said, "Sure?" He goes, "Yeah." So I turn around and there's Mike coming in. And I'm standing right next to the maitre d' who I have not spoken to. And all of a sudden he starts to say, "Devarona is here at Joe's on a Friday night when I've got judges and people I've known for 30 years, and he expects to get people in here just like that. Who is this Devarona?" And I'm sinking into the ground because I have my name tag. I don't know where to turn. And then the manager, Calvin, comes from the back. He goes, "Carlos, what happened?" I said, "I don't know. Ask him." So get my people in. The guy actually, the maitre d' ends up getting suspended for 2 days. And I guess that's my story. I mean, I wish he would have just told me no. Like, "No, you can't get people in here today." I would have understood that. But what he did to embarrass me in front of everybody with my name tag, no, I didn't appreciate that at all.
After all the years that we've known each other since the first day in the academy, we've been friends all these years. The friends and couple that you just mentioned in passing, that you call them up and say, "I'm bringing some friends over for dinner."
Yeah.
Well, that was Rosie and I,
Yeah.
right? And I forget what the occasion was, but you had called and said, "Hey, let's go to Joe's." And it was everything is advertised.
Yeah.
Right. What a great restaurant. The food was phenomenal. Right. And we want to go back. But for those that may be traveling to South Florida, if you've heard of Joe's, go to Joe's. You'll really enjoy the meal, the atmosphere, and everything. It's a staple and icon of South Beach. And just about every celebrity is eating there, right? Because they've heard about it.
Yes.
But everything is good. It's fantastic.
It's been open over 100 years. And yes, every celebrity that you could name will have been there.
That is incredible. It's been open that long.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like I mentioned that we've been friends a very long time. When cops are in trouble or need something, we call each other.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned it to me. So I had mentioned the Everglades earlier today. What's our story about the Everglades?
Well, I was asleep at home in my bed, and the phone rings. I don't know what time it was.
It was like 4:30 in the morning.
It was dark o'clock. It was dark. And I'm asleep, and I'm not picking up the phone. I don't think it was that late. I think it was 2-ish. And I don't pick up the phone because I didn't know the number. So I just wait. And then I realize it's Bert. I said, "Oh." I pick up the phone. "Hey, Bert, why are you calling me at 2 in the morning?" He says, "We have a friend who needs some help." I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, we need your help. We need you to come out. We need you to It's out in the Everglades. I said, sure, whatever you need. So I get dressed and go, and I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. So now they pick me up, and there's 3 airboats, and we're going out to the Everglades. We're driving out first, and I'm saying, I've never been on an airboat. You know, I'm a Cuban from New Jersey.
Neither have I.
They're loud, and just, I'd never been on one. So, but my first attempt at being on one is we're going to go out there and save 2 Miami-Dade officers who have overturned their airboat. And I said, we're going to do what? He says, yeah, we're going to go out there and we're going to help them up. I said, okay. So that's bad enough. We're on the airboats. We're heading out there. It's loud. It's dark. It's like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? I'm going to die out here. And then on the way there, he says, we're going to have to jump in the water. I said, what? He says, yeah, we have to jump in the water to put the chains on the airboat and to right the ship. I said, no. He says, yeah. I said, oh. Then he tells me a line that I will never forget. He says, those alligators are more scared of you than you are of them. I said, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But sure enough, we got there and we jumped in the water. I know I did. Did you jump in the water? I don't know who else you.
We put waders on.
I don't know who was there. I don't know what was happening. I just knew I went. We hooked on the thing to the airboat and we righted the ship and we jumped back on the boat and then got back. And your friend, was it Mal? Mal. And the other thing is when we got out there, they're sitting up there drinking beer going, where the hell you guys been? We've been up here for hours. I'm like, son of a bitch, we risked our lives to get here for you.
Yeah.
But we got them up and out and all good.
That was an interesting little rescue that we pulled off there.
Yeah. And then a couple of years later, they have the police memorial, and he's one of the speakers, Bert is, and he says, hey, I'm glad you're here because I'm going to talk about loyalty and friendship. And I went, what are you talking about, Willis? And that's what he...
yeah, a little context on that. Mal, who called me that morning, it was buddies of his from their airboat club, and Mal was still injured from having been shot by another officer accidentally, and he couldn't do it alone. He couldn't get his airboat out there, so he called me. He goes, I need more help. I said, I know who I can call. And that's when I called you. And then what he's referring to is I did the eulogy for Mal when he was enshrined into the police memorial at Tropical Park that evening. For the annual law enforcement memorial ceremony. So, yeah, when you call, you come running for your friends.
That's right? It. Never changed.
And on the job, even though on the job, and cops will understand this, you may not like each other, but when that button is pushed, you got to go help each other. You get them out of a jam, and then you can go on your way, and you don't have to like each other. But that's what we do for one another, and that was just one of the examples. I thought it was a great experience for us because I'd never been on an airboat. I've been through the Everglades on Tamiami Trail and 75, but never on an airboat.
Well, next time, call me at 9 a.m, though.
Well, I'll try to tell the guys to overturn their boat, a little bit later in the morning.
But that doesn't change because when you retire, every time I pass officers who are out there writing a ticket, and I'm always looking to see if they need our help, I'm 64 years old. What am I going to do? But if he needs help or she, we're out there.
Well, it's in our DNA and we can't help it.
Yeah.
Quick story about that. When Rosie and I were on our honeymoon in London, I remember we were walking back from dinner from a pub, and there was, everything in London is old. All the old buildings, the castle type structures.
Including you.
True. But you're actually a few months older than me, so. And there were 2 London bobbies on a traffic stop. And we had stopped along the wall on the sidewalk. The sidewalk was very wide. And Rosie asked me, she goes, what are you doing? I said, those 2 guys don't know it, but I'm their backup because they don't carry weapons, right? And I'm watching what they were doing. And can you say officer safety, children? Like Mr. Rogers?
Yeah.
Because they had no idea what that was. The violator was walking around uncontrolled. They were turning their back on him. And I'm watching this and I'm going, oh, God. Suppose he pulls a knife. Suppose he does something. They have no clue what they were doing. So like you said, it's in my DNA. It's in our DNA. I had to stand there and watch to make sure that they were okay and they got back in their car and they left.
Yeah.
Because should have something have happened, I would have jumped in. Because that's just what we do. It's who we are.
Yeah.
And I guess we're always going to be that way until we're no longer here.
Thank goodness.
So, well, I got one last set of questions for you before we close out. And you don't know they're coming.
Oh.
Yep. So, if anybody during watching TV, there was this show that used to be on called Inside the Actor Studio. James Lipton was the host, and he interviewed actors. And at the end, he had a list of questions for them, just off the wall, random stuff, about them. So I kind of stole some of the questions from him, and I added some of my own.
All right.
So this is to get inside the mind of Carlos Devarona.
Gotcha.
So, what is your favorite word?
Yes.
All right, so you're a positive person.
Sometimes. Most of the time, yes.
Okay, cool. What is your least favorite word?
No.
Okay. One kind of follows the other.
Yeah.
What turns you on spiritually or emotionally?
When I see somebody helping somebody else, and they don't have to.
Right.
Just out of the blue, somebody opens a door for somebody or helps somebody up. That turns.
Yeah, that's
I like
nice.
that. Yeah.
What turns you off?
What turns me off? Um, I can't think of anything right now. I don't know
Okay.
how to answer that.
What is your favorite curse word? You can say it. There's no rules here.
Favorite curse word that I use all the time? It all depends on the occasion. I mean, if I
So if you had to pick one,
oh fuck,
there you go.
I don't know.
You already said it.
I know.
What sound or noise do you love?
Quiet. I really like it quiet. I don't like any sound.
Okay. What sound or noise do you hate?
It's just too loud. You know, when it's too loud, you're too old. That's me. If the music is too loud, please turn it down. Yeah.
You mean like at a rap concert that we went to together with our kids a long time ago?
What did you?
It was Eminem first.
Oh my God, that's right.
And then
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre.
That was a good time. Yeah. Yeah. No,
For the kids.
Yeah, for the kids, it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would you have liked to live if it's other than where you live now?
Honestly, I could live anywhere in the world. I have no. I always tell my wife I could live under a bridge. I don't need a lot of things, but anywhere in the world would be fine for me. There's no particular place. There's no one place.
Okay. Who's your favorite fictional hero?
Fictional. It's got to be Superman.
You and me both.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. What person or persons do you admire most? Besides those of us at Metro-Dade Park Rangers.
Just those that have given their lives for us so that we could be here. Any armed services, police, fire, anybody who's given their life, I just respect the hell out of them that
Yeah.
they were able to do that for us.
Yeah,
Be
for
here.
sure.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt or would like to have attempted? And I think I might know the answer to that.
It's not firefighter. What would I like to? I want to be a ball player, but that's not. Yeah, it is a profession.
It
I
is.
can't believe the millions they make for hitting a ball.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
For all the athletes.
yeah.
But yeah, I figured you were going to say ball player.
Yeah.
You and me both. Like I said, I wanted to be a soccer player.
Yeah.
What profession would you not have attempted?
Anything that dealt with heights. I hate heights. Hate them. I mean, I make fun of firefighters all the time, but those guys going up in the ladders and doing all that stuff, it overrides their playing with all the hoses that they play with.
I've developed a fear of heights as I've
Yeah.
gotten older. Yeah. If heaven exists, What would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome. Come on in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for us or anybody?
No, this has been great. I enjoy talking to you always. Um, you've been a great friend for all these years. Hope that continues. This is what, 42 years now
43.
today? 43,
Yep. It's over 43.
which is what I consider you, a 43. I'm not going to say what that is, but some of you know
Well,
what
we
it
can
is.
say, it's okay. For those outside of Dade County, the police codes in Dade County are kind of unique. And 43 is our code for a mentally ill person that we refer to as a Baker Act.
There he is.
Okay. Well, you know what? Like you said at the beginning of this, I wasn't crazy when I took the job, right?
Here I am.
And yet here we are.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Carlos, I can't thank you enough for kicking off the podcast. I really appreciate it. It started with the Academy. It started with you and me and the other guys. And we wouldn't be here today had we not done that. So I want to close out. And what I'd like to do at the end of every podcast is I'd like to honor those that, like Carlos just said, the ones that made the ultimate sacrifice. In the last several weeks, I went back and I looked at who we lost in the line of duty around the country. So we want to pay honor to them. And we're going to go back May 2nd. Deputy Larry Henderson Jr., 57 years old, Hamilton County, Ohio, vehicular assault. I guess he got run over somehow. May 5th, Lieutenant Alan Nucci Credur, 49 years old, from the Rain Police Department in Louisiana. Friendly fire. Accidental discharge, something like that. May 20th, Deputy Nathaniel Ansay, 24 years old, Florence County, South Carolina, vehicle crash, which is the most common way that cops get killed now. May 26th, Deputy Daniel Sherder, 31 years old, Morrow County, Ohio, gunfire. May 31st, Officer Samuel Riveros, 35 years old, Baldwin Park, California, gunfire. May 31st, Officer Timothy Ontiveros, Bloomfield, New Mexico, gunfire. June 1st, Sergeant G. Day White, he was in his 40s, and I couldn't get an exact age on him, Angleton, Texas, struck by a vehicle. June 5th, Officer Crystal Rivera, 36 years old, Chicago PD, friendly fire during a struggle. Means they were. I read they were fighting over with a subject over and managed to get the gun or something. June 8th, Officer Gabriel Facio, 46, Apache Junction, Arizona. Gunfire on a traffic stop. He probably got ambushed when he walked up to the car. So you can see that just in the last 2 months, we've lost quite a bit of our brothers and sisters around the country. And then our fallen firefighters, I almost became a firefighter. I was this close, and then the police department called me. And firefighters are my heroes, so I want to go over a couple of them as well. April 23rd, Captain David Meyer, 54 years old, Chicago Fire Department. A storage facility collapse. April 24th, firefighter Scott Adams, 46, Milton, Washington Township. Unknown injury. April 27th, firefighter Graham Hoffman, 29 years old, Kansas City, Missouri, an assault of some kind to a firefighter. May 6th, firefighter Mark Keller, 59 years old, Mesa Fire Department, unknown injuries while on duty. May 16th, Cadet Simeon Williams, Cleveland Fire, unknown injury during training. So it goes to show you once again how dangerous our training and the fire training is. May 16th, Charles Mudra, 53, emergency vehicle driver for Baltimore City Fire, training accident. May 16th, again, 3rd May 16th, Major Leslie Les Roger, 57, Laurel County Fire from Kentucky, unknown injury. May 17th, Lieutenant Mark Ray Dranbauer Jr., 44 years old, Baltimore City, overexertion on a search and rescue operation. He had a heart attack. And then May 28th, David Warfel, 57, the forest maintenance supervisor, Pennsylvania Department of Conservation. Training, he had a heart attack. So, and you can see the ages on the heart attacks. And finally, June 5th, firefighter Jake Wayne Bridges, 20 years old, Hickory, North Carolina fire, unknown injury while on duty. So he was a new guy. So we're saddened by the loss of our colleagues, both in the police and fire service, and we hope that their families are coping, as we say, but we know it's tough. So, in closing, I'd like to ask you to support some of the charities that my wife and I support, starting with Tunnel to Towers Foundation. If you haven't heard of them, they provide homes and pay off mortgages for the families of fallen first responders, for Gold Star families of soldiers killed in service of their country, and they build smart homes for the disabled veterans. So it's something very important to us. Go to t2t.org to help support them. It's not very costly. It's only $11 a month. St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. I have a personal story with a friend of mine and his wife and kid that went to St. Jude's. Everything you hear on TV about them is absolutely true. The families don't pay for anything at all while their children are being treated. It's a wonderful organization, and I strongly recommend or ask you to support them. And two last things. I am a member of the Miami-Dade Regional Peer Support Team. And this is an organization where an officer or their family can reach out to us. And if they need somebody to talk to, or the family members need to talk to somebody and they're struggling, we provide counseling. And it's a great way to help them get through their struggles. And it's completely confidential. No one is ever going to know. Your departments are not going to know. So please reach out. The number is 754-315-PEER. That's 754-315-7337. Like I said, completely confidential. If you're struggling, if you're thinking about doing something that, let's just say it. If you're thinking about killing yourself, please call us. We will get somebody to you to talk to you and get you the help that you need for you or your family. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline goes hand in hand with this. 800-273-8255. Everything is confidential, as you know with them, or you can text HOME to 741-741. Please, if you're struggling, reach out so we don't lose another one of our cops or firefighters or one of our military personnel. So thank you for being with us for this very first episode of Sergeant Maverick, the podcast. We'll try to do better next time. But last thing I want to say is my favorite television sergeant, Phil Esterhaus, always said in Hill Street Blues, let's be careful out there. Thanks. Take care.